Baruch Hashem, we continue to have many wonderful opportunities for simchas, and we would like to just wish Mazel Tov to Rabbi and Mrs. Ifra, of course, one of the outstanding Rabbeim in our Yeshiva upon the birth of a baby boy. And now we come to our wonderful, illustrious alumni, Mazel Tov to Akiva Neuer upon his recent engagement to Rose Just Michael. Mazel Tov to Rabbi Danny Koenigsberg, a Rebbe himself, upon the birth of a baby boy. Mazel Tov to Lee Mirowitz upon his recent marriage to Chana Kaiser. And Mazel Tov to Shuli Hachman upon his recent engagement to Abigail Chamdi. May all of you only have continued simcha in your families and much nachas. In this week's Parsha, Beshalach, the Torah describes a rather beleaguered Am Yisrael. In front of them, the Yam. Behind them, the Egyptians pursuing them. And in a sense, they were really up the creek, as it were, without a paddle. And the Torah then goes on to describe the drama of what happened. Uparo hikri vayisu b'nei Yisrael senehem v'nei Mitzrayim nosei achareim. The Egyptians are pursuing us. Vayireu ma'od. We were frightened. Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael el Hashem. We cry out to Hashem. What is the nature of the cry that Klal Yisrael invoked? The Torah goes on to describe it. In Pasuk Yud Aleph, Perek Yud Aleph, Vayomeru el Moshe. They told Moshe, Hamibli and Kevarim b'Mitzrayim. Are there no graves in Egypt? L'kachtanu lomus b'midbar, that you took us to die in the desert? Mazal sasisa lanu l'otzianu b'Mitzrayim. What did you take us out for? Halozeh adavar shedibarnu elecha b'Mitzrayim lemor. This is what we told you. Chadal mimenu. V'navdas Mitzrayim. Ki tov lanu avodas Mitzrayim mimuseinu b'midbar. We would prefer to be under the auspices of the Egyptians, under their Egypt, under their aegis, rather than die in the desert. We are astounded. The Torah presented this with the Hakdama Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem, that Klal Yisrael are apparently engaged in tefillah. And the Mefarshim note that Mima Makim Krasicha Hashem, there's no better opportune moment for tefillah than in a time of siege, a time of stress, a time of anguish. And yet when we examine the nature of this tefillah, we find it to be terribly lacking. And so Rashi alludes to this idea when Rashi has the following striking comment on the pasuk that speaks of Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem, pasuk Yud. Says Rashi, utilizing an expression which is distinctive and singular, Vayitzaku tafsu umanus avosam. Rashi said they turned on the faucet. They turned on the berez. They simply latched on to the craft of their forebears. With Avram Avinu, the Torah speaks of Avram engaged in tefillah. With Yitzchak, Yitzchak l'suach basodeh, he was misakin tefillas mincha. With Yaakov, Vayivka b'makom, and all of this was something that was, shall we say, instinctive. But clearly the tefillah was lacking. Clearly the tefillah was not a tefillah mimamake halev, as tefillah should be, but rather it was an instinctive kind of reaction, almost a lahavdil, Pavlovian reaction. And that reaction the Torah describes in the language of Vayitzaku, and Rashi right away is on the case from the nature of their so-called tzalka, which was essentially a querulous complaint to Moshe Rabbeinu that they would prefer back and they would prefer to be back in Mitzrayim. That's why Rashi comments Tafsu Nesavosam. One has to examine very carefully one's tefillah to make sure that the tefillah that I'm engaged in is a tefillah mimamake alev, a tefillah that is sincere, a tefillah that comes from leib nishbar v'nitke elokim losivzeh, a broken heart who wants to connect to Hashem Yisbarach, who's not simply using the tefillah as a kind of instinctive crutch that the Torah describes here. Halavai, that all our tefillah should be those that reflect a heartfelt, petitionary kind of response of a person who's looking to connect with Hashem Yisbarach and who honestly is, in effect, saying to Hashem Yisbarach, Hashloich al Hashem Yehovcha v'hu yichal kalecha. Throw to Hashem all of our difficulties and connect with Hashem Yisbarach, and hopefully Hashem Yisbarach b'siyata d'shmaya will help us resolve our issues. The question of the week was how should one view the entire enterprise of biblical criticism and the like. This is a very complicated question, and of course one has to define the terms, what exactly is entailed, what is inherent in biblical criticism. But in general, I would like to make a statement which I think is so very significant and very important. Before one can engage in biblical criticism, one has to really plow the Tanakh from the very beginning to the very end. One of the chisronos, one of the shortcomings that often we have is we don't learn Tanakh properly. We don't learn it with the proper depth. We're not sufficiently familiar with it. The Gemara says in Brachas, Minu b'nechem and ayigoyon. Rashi says, Al tagilim b'mikra yesim midai. We should not learn Mikra excessively. But Rashi also writes in Kisisa, and Chazal tell us that the Talmud Chacham has to be mekushad b'chavdal kishutim. Talmud Chacham has to be adorned with 24 adornments, the 24 svarim of Tanakh. And before one can approach any of the enterprises associated with biblical criticism, one has to have thorough and stupendous knowledge of Tanakh, literally backwards and forwards, and has to have an understanding of the great personalities of the great Avos and Imos and other great tzaddikim who actually traversed the pages of our Tanakh, and one has to know their lives, highways and byways, intimately. Only then can one approach the entire matter, and therefore often people who approach Tanakh from a biblical criticism standpoint are not yet sufficiently endowed with that kind of knowledge which would give them the ability to really handle the biblical critics in the proper way that one should approach. Undoubtedly, there is value to be found in many literary approaches to Tanakh and many other kinds of analyses or structural analyses. They certainly contribute much to our understanding, but one has to be extremely careful, extremely cautious. One approaches the Gdolei HaUmmah, the great personalities, the great models that we have. Essentially, Tanakh should be studied in order to understand how one should behave, in order to understand the Darkei Hashem, in order that one should be able to emulate the attributes of Ribono Shel Olam. And if we approach Tanakh with a thorough knowledge of it, and we approach Tanakh trying to understand and fathom the beautiful personalities that walk through the Tanakh, then we'll be able to have a great appreciation of what not only Torah Sheba'al Peh is all about, but what Torah Sheb'Ksav is all about, and Torah Sheb'Ksav as well has to be studied through the eyes of the Parshanei HaMikra, through the eyes of Torah Sheba'al Peh. We have that entire perspective, then in Mitzvah Hashem we'll be able to have a full and wonderful creation of what the Tanakh is all about.